Velkommen to Minifuel. You're listening to Minisode 10D, and have I got some great content for you in this minisode. But first, what played you out? It was the Throwback Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy 2. I just love that music. It's a remix of the N64 main theme, or the Super Mario 64 main theme. Just a song that I've grown up with. It always gets me in a good mood. And playing you guys out will be Bowser's Lava Lair, also a remix of the N64 game, or music. Just because Super Mario Odyssey is out, it's amazing. And I've just really been enjoying playing some old school Super Mario again. So you guys are going to get Mario music. But on to the content. I'm really excited about this, guys. I've got James Hewitt on the line. He is a former game designer at Games Workshop. He's worked on Age of Sigmar. He's worked on 40K. He's worked at the Specialist Games. But for this segment and for the next episode, he's here to talk about Gorechosen and Silver Tower. On this minisode, though, it's all about Gorechosen. I love this little game. I think it's a lot of fun, and he's really he's got a lot of good insight. So I hope you guys enjoy just this little peek behind the designer curtain of a game that many of you have probably played, and if you haven't, you probably should. Enjoy! Welcome to another segment of Fjordhammer. Joining me today is James Hewitt. James, welcome.
Hello, and thank you for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. So, James, I've got you on today because you've been working on this hobby that all my listeners enjoy. And why don't you introduce yourself and what you've previously worked on and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, sure. So, for those that have never heard of me, which is probably quite a few people out there, I worked as part of the development team, the rules development team at Games Workshop for the past 3 years. So I was there when we were designing Age of Sigmar. I wasn't the lead designer, but I think I had a few ideas that made it in, which was quite cool. I did a lot of work on the War Scroll compendiums, designed a few of the battle tomes that came out. I also put together a few box games, so Horus Heresy, Betrayal at Calth, Silver Tower, and Gorechosen were all me. And then I moved down to the Specialist Games department and did Blood Bowl, Necromunda, and the soon, at some point, honest to be released Adeptus Titanicus. It'll happen eventually. And since July, I've been doing stuff for myself. I left Games Workshop. I'm now, I've got my own little company called Needy Cat Games. And I'm doing kind of freelance game design. I'm like a mercenary or some kind of privateer on the high seas, but with more dice and fewer cannons.
The high seas of Nottingham?
The high seas of the very, very landlocked Nottingham that is very far from the sea, yeah. Well, as far from the sea as you can get when you live on what is basically an island.
I think it quite well fits the definition of an island.
Absolutely. We like to pretend that it's not, though.
All right. So, since I'm quite a fan of your games, I'll be happy to admit, and that's why I wanted to have you on.
Awesome.
And for this segment, and probably for one or two more, we'll be talking about Gorechosen and Silver Tower. And, of course, feel free to mention anything else that might be, entertaining for the listeners out there.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll totally do this completely original question that you haven't heard before. About Gorechosen, how far does the game stray from your original game idea?
So it's actually kind of interesting. When I was at Games Workshop, all of the games I designed All of them start with a brief from management. So someone further up the chain would decide we're making a game based on X, Y, or Z, and then they would come to the rules team, and one of us would get given that task. So in this case, Gorechosen came about because there was a little bit of a drive to come up with games that used existing miniatures in new ways. So, for example, Lost Patrol had been out, or had been designed, I think, about a month before, and that was kind of an exercise, a test, if you will, to see if that was something that we could do, and that seemed to go down pretty well. So yeah, the brief I got given was we're going to make a pit fighting game using existing Khorne hero miniatures. I think at the time a couple of the like the alternate poses for the Exalted Deathbringer and the Blood Secrator. No, not the Blood Secrator. Who am I thinking of? Slaughter Priest.
Slaughter Priest, yeah.
That was it. Yeah, the two variants of those hadn't come out yet, but they were kind of incorporated. I knew they'd be coming out, so it was kind of part of the design. And yeah, so really the original idea was it's a game, there's a bunch of Khorne heroes in a pit and they're fighting. And that was kind of it. That said, I did have like some first thoughts that... Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was the joy of this game. It was so straightforward as a concept, and it's lovely to have a game that is kind of that, that straightforward. But yeah, I had a few ideas. Like I wanted it to be all against all, last man standing wins. I wanted it to be something where movement was really important and integral. What I really wanted it not to be was just rolling dice, and whoever rolls the best dice is always the winner. That I felt the game needed to be more than that, and I think it hopefully pretty much that's the case.
Yeah, I think it does. I've played this game with my non-gaming friends quite a few times. My girlfriend's taking a bit of a liking to it.
Excellent.
Actually, so much so that she's requested that I bring it along when we travel to friends and family.
Oh, brilliant!
And
it's a game, as long as you get friends who don't mind, the crazy over the top blood and death and carnage. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's got a very Warhammer theme.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean the artwork, the cover art, the title in particular, it was all really designed to be kind of old school 80s Warhammer, just crazy over the top, blood, skulls, death, And that was the real driving force behind the game, was get just a really simple, back to basics, old school game.
Yeah, the models are even painted mostly in red.
Absolutely, there's just red everywhere,
All right, so I'm running this with the assumption that most of my listeners have some sort of idea about these games and how they work, just because usually I don't find it as interesting to have the designers talk about how their game works, because like there's so many other things we could ask you now that I have you here. I've got
that sounds not at all sinister. It's fine.
And so one of the questions and one of the things that really sort of surprised me when I opened and started playing this game is the card-based activations. Like, that's not something that I'm used to seeing from other Games Workshop products, and is much more reminiscent of like regular board games. So
yeah.
Why is this game using that and not like dice as it usually is?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I'm a big board game fan generally. I've been playing kind of modern board games as long as I've been playing war games, really. So I've kind of got dual loves in that regard. So I think whenever I design a game, I'm always thinking from those two perspectives. And in my mind, whenever you're designing a game, what you want to do is give the players lots of juicy decisions to make. As I was saying, when you get a game that just comes down to dice rolling, there's a lot of luck involved, and if you win, you can get the feeling that you've won because you got lucky. Whereas if you bring in lots of chances for people to make decisions, then a win is hard fought, and a loss, you can think, well, that was down to me, I'll do better next time. And I think cards give you a really interesting set of tools to use when you're designing a game. So, for example, when you're playing Gorechosen, you get a hand of cards, and each one has got 3 different actions on it. So, an attack, a move, and a something else. And so, not only are you picking one of those 5 cards to use on your turn, you also
special ability to pushing someone.
Yeah, or just shouting to the crowd and getting all fired up, Yeah, all the different things. And so you're picking not only one of these 5 cards, you're picking one of the 3 actions on the card. So it means that in your turn, you've got kind of a choice of 15 different things, one of which will probably be a really good idea. And the trick is just, knowing which one of those it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was it to me, really.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because with the way that you burn the whole card if you play it, so not on that card.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to weigh the options.
You do, and there's something quite nice in the fact that across the turn, your hand of cards runs out. You run out of options, and I think there's something interesting there. So as I say, I think game design is in the decisions, and when you start reducing the decisions available to a person, and they have to start improvising, that's really interesting. So I've seen people, there's certain actions on there, especially the special ones. So kick, for example, you don't see very often. But when someone uses it well, and often because they're in a tight spot and they kind of have to use it, it can be really satisfying to see that go well.
Yeah, it's the idea that nobody remembers a tactical game of shoots and ladders.
No, exactly. Although I think it's far, it's time for someone to add some rules to that game to make it a strategic, in-depth kind of thing.
Yeah,
my next
your next pitch, your next Kickstarter idea, is it?
Absolutely, death snakes and wall ladders. It'll be great.
And now that we're on the cards, one of the things that showed up in the reviews a lot, and one of the things that hasn't shown up in my game so much, is the decapitation critical strike.
Yeah.
And I've heard the game criticized quite a bit from this, like the one card in the game that can instantly kill an opponent. And I was just wondering, how do you feel that this card improves the game?
So it's really a controversial one, isn't it? That card really, if people don't like the game, that's the thing they will seize onto. And I do get that because I think that for me, player elimination in a game is something that should only be introduced with a lot of thought. I can't stand it when you're playing a game and one of you gets knocked out 10 minutes in and it's a 2-hour long game and you're just not involved in the fun for the rest of the evening, are you? So anything that does that I can totally see being controversial. But the reason it went in there is it's actually a lesson I learned, and this is crazy, but the game Monopoly is it's well known as a game that everyone's played a couple of times, but everyone tends to play it wrong. There's a lot of house rules and things, and what you get a lot of the time, the house rules will be things like if you pay money into the bank, it sits on the free parking space, and if you land on it, you get to collect the money. And one of the big criticisms of Monopoly is it goes on too long, and the reason it goes on too long is the whole game is designed to be about attrition. So you're gradually losing money throughout the game because of all the different things that can happen to you, and then you drop out, and the game is over when there's one person standing. If you have a rule which gives people money back, then all you're doing is you're slowing the game down. And because of that lesson there, that kind of came into Gorechosen. There is nothing in there which will ever heal you or let you recover wounds. And similarly, I wanted to have something in there that is just a quick, straightforward, you are dead now. Just to really make it really obvious the game is pushing towards a conclusion. And just to add that kind of, sudden excitement, because to me this sort of scenario where you've got a pit fight going on, you need to have those sudden twists of fate where someone who is really on the ropes leaps forward and against the odds decapitates their opponent. That's quite cool in my book. But it's interesting. So I've seen a lot of people on forums, because I do read a lot of forums and things. People say don't read your reviews, but I can't help it. I like finding out what people like.
I think people say that, but everyone reads their reviews.
Of course, I think anyone who doesn't is a liar or is a better man than me. But yeah, I mean, I've seen some people say take the card out completely. Some people say leave it out, but shuffle it in when you get the Blood is Spilled card, and you shuffle the deck, shuffle it in there so it doesn't come in the very first part of the game. I can kind of see that. That's interesting. But when I suggested this online, I forget where I think it was on Twitter or something. Loads of people came back and went, "No, that's the fun of the game. You can die straight away," you know. And again, I mean, it never came up as a problem in test games. I've never had it in the games I've played myself of it since the game came out. I'm guessing some people somewhere have just had it happen in the first couple of turns, and I can see why that would ruin your night. So yeah. In short, to answer your question, I think it maybe doesn't improve the game, but it certainly makes it potentially more threatening. You know, and that to me is fun.
Once you know about it, it heightens the tension slightly.
Precisely, yeah. Knowing it's there, yeah. What I really enjoyed was the first time you see someone see that card. So during testing, yeah, people are playing it for the first time, and the first time that card comes out, it doesn't normally happen. So then no one gets decapitated, but then people know that card's in there. And it's like, whoa, okay, that's the game we're playing. And it makes people really want to push for the big money. Really,
yeah, I can totally see that. I actually agree with the idea of having it in there, just because this isn't a very long game. Like, it can last long, but usually it doesn't last forever. So knocking someone out isn't like knocking someone out in the first 3 turns of Risk, where everyone else is now playing a 6-hour game and you're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's fun because of the kind of like not so serious short game it is.
Absolutely. I mean, that was always the intention, was to make a game that is kind of, it's a bit of filler, it's a bit of fun, but it's an interesting game at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that was actually an issue for me and in my group is the amount of tokens that this game has. Now, this is maybe because my gaming group aren't board gamers. They aren't used to games with lots of tokens.
Yeah.
But you do place like a lot of tokens on your player card, and to cover wounds and to look at stuff like that. So what was the decision around having all of these tokens and not just telling people ignore the first space, or having one token?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of keeping things quite visual, so I think part of it comes from the fact that I'm quite absent-minded myself. If I'm told to remember something, I will generally forget unless I've put a marker down or something. So when I play Age of Sigmar, I always make tokens for any command abilities or anything like that, because I will just forget that I've done a thing otherwise. And so for my mind, it's better to put a token on a sheet to show that you've lost that top space of your injury track. And yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think from my point of view, I thought it was actually quite conservative. I thought it didn't have many tokens, but I can see if you're coming at this from the point of view of a wargamer where you don't tend to have a lot of card components and things, not anymore certainly, it does seem like there's quite a lot. I think because you have you've got your one that's tracking your number of injuries you've taken, so you're adding those markers down the side. You've got the one that's actually tracking where your health is currently. You've got the 2 covering your healthy and injured boxes. So yeah, I suppose there is quite a lot going on, but I think, as I say, we tried a few different things. So we tried doing the wound track in a few different ways. And at one point we were looking at kind of having it sliding like a big, like a piece of board. You'd slide down the sheet to block off different areas, but just putting tokens down ended up being the easiest way. So I apologise for all the tokens. I'll try to put no tokens in future.
No, I don't mind them. I just like bringing up these things because it's the experience that I've had when playing this game, and the issue that some of the people that I've been playing it with have had.
Yeah. It's interesting. 'Cause I think whenever you design a game, I mean, certainly from my point of view, I'm always trying to cut down the number of components because it's very easy to put in a dozen different components for things. It's kind of the easy route, and actually, you can often improve the game by removing some stuff. There's quite a lot of games out there. Fantasy Flight are very good at this, so they'll just throw in a million components because that's kind of where the value is for the game for them. But I find everything that I've done, the more you can reduce it, the better the game ends up.
Brevity is the soul of wit and all that.
Absolutely. It's like having a bonsai tree. You know, you're just constantly cutting away at the game and removing the bits that
Hacking
don't
at
quite
it
go the
with
way
an
you want it
axe.
to. That is exactly the way a bonsai tree works, yeah. I want to see your bonsai trees.
They're not very pretty. They're also pines.
But they're very sparse. Yeah, of course, yeah.
So,
yeah.
one of the
pines.
things that interests me is obviously you're using miniatures of, that aren't traditional board game miniatures. Like, you'd usually see, like, now I forget all their names, but, regular board games, you do have miniatures there, and they're usually designed very specifically for that game, for the mechanics in mind. But obviously here you're using models that aren't designed for a pit fighting board game. So how was the process of like turning dynamic wargaming models into like proper board game pieces that felt and fit the game well?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. As you say, I mean, a lot of board games, the best you'll get is kind of a PVC plastic. It's a playing piece. It might look like a miniature, but it's very much designed not to be painted, it won't have as much detail as a nice miniature. But when you're designing games for Games Workshop, the miniatures absolutely come first. So, I mean, there were a few considerations there. I mean, first of all, the fact that you really have to make sure that the rules capture the character of the miniature as much as the not just the weapons it's carrying, but kind of the personality, all that kind of thing. And secondly, you've got to make sure that the board doesn't get too overcrowded, because some of them have really got kind of weapons sticking out in different directions. The guy with the anvil, who has a name, I'm sure he does, the Skull Grinder.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't write the names of the characters for this, so I always forget who they are. But it's the Skull
It's the
Grinder.
anvil guy and the big axe guy.
Yeah, he can be quite. If the hexes were any smaller, he would definitely be getting in people's faces a bit too much. But yeah, that was kind of the process there. Really was just to look at the miniatures, because obviously they came first, as I say. Looking at them, working out what makes them stand out, and then making sure that gets incorporated into the game.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's what I've been speculating about, how at Games Workshop one designs games around the models.
It's always the models first. Whatever happens, the models always come first. Although that said, I think it is changing a bit now. Just after I left, there was a bit of a shake-up, a bit of a change around. There's been a bit of a change in the last couple of years. Before, when I was in the rules team, it was always the case. The models were always first. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think it's now opening up a bit more. So the rules team have a bit more freedom to design things. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But I know, for example, that Shadespire is definitely a lot more rules focused than anything that I would have been able to work on while I was there. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think Shadespire is promoted as the premier competitive game, which is not something that we would have seen from Games Workshop a couple of years ago.
No, absolutely. It was. It's something that I know. So the guy that designed it, David Sanders, he was like my replacement on the rules team, and he is a massive fan of board games. And when I heard he was doing this, I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is going to be something that he can really kind of, excel at. And I've not played the game since it came out, but I played an early version of it, and sure enough, it absolutely fits that same kind of niche that like X-Wing or Magic the Gathering fits into. Those kind of games where you can turn up to a gaming store or a club and play 3 or 4 sessions in an evening, and it's really it's had so much testing to be balanced competitively. So yeah, I think that's a really exciting time for Games Workshop games generally.
All right. So, getting back to Gorechosen, you talked a bit about wanting to making this a tactical game rather than a just a dice
Yeah,
rolling game, and I think the way that, at least for me, the way that you've done this is, making the board hexagons and then making movement and facing very important.
yeah.
And but how does the and I'm gonna read out the question as I've written it. Why do the characters have facing? Just because the models, for me as a actually a video game philosopher,
Yeah.
um, the difference between the models and their mechanics
Yeah.
here is a bit difficult for me, because I've had issues with my players that have just had their characters facing all kinds of directions, because the models obviously aren't designed to have a specific facing or a very visual
Yeah.
facing, yet you've designed that into the game. So how do you, or rather, what was that something that you thought about, or were you mostly thinking about making the tactical game?
It was, yeah, it was definitely something that I thought about. I think it was kind of, it was a compromise, if you will. So I knew that for the game to work, for it to have interesting decisions to be made, and for it to be more than just dice rolling, you've really got to have movement and maneuvering. So when I was designing this, I watched loads of kind of gladiator fight scenes from movies. Because that's
I want that
it was
job.
great. I mean, I did it. The way when I go into a game like this, I always kind of load myself up on as much kind of media as I can on that subject. So I did a load of that kind of thing, and it's always the movement. It's moving around the arena, dodging, ducking. The fighters kind of looking to find their ideal position, and so I thought that needs to be in this game. You can't not have movement and positioning, and so for that to be the case, you need to have a system where you can kind of do things like get around behind people, or that kind of thing. And for that, really, a facing mechanic needs to be part of it. I was looking initially into whether it would be possible to actually put different bases in there, so put them on like hexagonal bases, but that was an immediate no, because at the end of the day, the aim of this product is to sell these models, and then people to go, hey, maybe I should play Age of Sigmar with these because they're cool, right? And it's got to be it's got to do those two things. It's got to be an interesting game and also lead into Age of Sigmar. So yeah, as I say, in the end, it was kind of a compromise. I think the rulebook says something about use the way they're looking to tell which way they're facing, but yeah, ideally, if you were to buy this game purely to play Gorechosen, I would say go and find yourself some big hexagonal bases and put them on there, and it'll all be nice and straightforward.
So I'm gonna ask a fluff question here. Have you seen the 3D Gorechosen board that
About a dozen people have sent
been...
it to me, including people at Games Workshop, and I'm just so happy. I love it. Was it done for Armies on Parade, I think?
Yeah, I think so,
cool.
or a gaming store
so
or
cool.
something.
Love it. It gets me...
Yeah, I've always...
That kind of thing gets me so excited,
That's always good to hear. So, and here I'm gonna give you maybe a strange question. Do you feel like breaking out this game at your own board game nights?
So I haven't done in a while, but I did. So normally for my birthday, I do like a board games night. I rent out a room at a local pub or something, and get a bunch of friends around. So last year, just after this came out, we had my birthday and about 20 people there. And sure enough, one of the first games we pulled out was Gorechosen, mainly because it had just come out and I wanted to play the finished version, which is so rare. When you're designing a game, every game you play is a work in progress, and you're looking for what's wrong with it, and you're playing with weird stand-in components, And I wanted to play a game of it, as it was, and it went down really well, and so we've played it a few more times since then, and yeah, it always gets a good little reaction. It's kind of weird. I never like to be the one to suggest playing it because that feels a little bit kind of, hey guys, want to play my game? But yeah, of the games I've designed, this one's probably had the most play. Although that said, Silver Towers had a few games as well, but we'll get onto that later.
Yeah, definitely. So that's actually quite most of the questions that I have. So I'm gonna give you my little bonus question for this.
Go for it.
What is the most elegant solution in this game?
So I think that potentially the most elegant thing in the game is the wound track. I think it's not perfect, but the way that the wound track works with the critical injuries, I think that it works really nicely. You've effectively got 36 wounds, but the frequency of your critical injuries increases as the game goes on, and the way it does that, it captures that kind of escalation quite nicely. I think it's not perfect because it's quite difficult to explain it, and I always have a little bit of trouble explaining it to new players. But it's one of those mechanics that I think works really nicely. I can't take credit for it. It was Jervis Johnson, the man himself, legendary game designer, who I was lucky enough to work with and sit next to for 2 years. And it was him that kind of suggested doing it this particular way. I forget exactly how I had it before, but it was a little bit more complex, and he just helped simplify it. And yeah, I think that's probably, if I had to pick out one part and say that was elegant, that would be that one. But
all right,
I
excellent.
think there's a limit to how elegant something can be when it's in a game called Gorechosen.
Yeah, well, there's the dance of death. Or
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. I think we'll wrap up Gorechosen a bit there, unless there's something. Is there anything you'd like to toot your own horn about for this game?
I don't know, just what I like about Gorechosen is it's one of the games that I've done that people actually enjoy playing and let me know about, which I always like that. It's always quite nice to have people say, I've enjoyed this game. The first one that I did, so Betrayal at Calth, which was the Horus Heresy board game, I think 5 people played it and everyone else just threw the cardboard away and painted the Space Marines. So it was really nice when this came out to see people actually playing the game, and I've seen it played at games nights. I've seen it. I went to the Horus Heresy Weekender, and people were playing it in the pub there, in the bar afterwards. And yeah, I think that's really cool. Especially because I get to just pop my head in and go, "Hey, I wrote that." But no, overall, I love it. I think considering the game was written in about 3 weeks, I think overall plus testing. That was really, really quick for any game design. It really was. It was a really, really fun project. I knew it was a success because about a week into it, we were doing some very early tests, and I had Pete Foley, who's the studio manager for Games Workshop. He actually put his head around the playtest room door and said, "Can you guys keep it down, please? I'm trying to work." Because we were all laughing so much, and to me, that's a sign that the game is a winner. So yeah,
it's also a sign you guys need soundproof doors.
Absolutely. But hey, when there's laughter in an office, that's never a bad thing, right?
That's true. That's true.
It. So yeah, Gorechosen.
Yeah, guys, go out and play it. It's actually quite a lot of fun. All right, thank you, James, for your Gorechosen insights.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me on here.
Let's move on to the Silver Tower. Yeah. For you guys listening to this episode, we'll be covering the Silver Tower in the next segment with James. I don't know how that's going to work quite yet, but that's going to be really good as well. I hope, James. Please.
I hope so too.
That's it for this mini-sode. Tune in next week for another segment, or go back to find the full episode, which is released monthly. If you'd like more content, check out my YouTube channel, Fjordhammer TV, for videos, uploads of the episodes, and some exclusive content, including streaming. You can also follow me on Twitter at Darth_Alec and at Fjordhammer, or on Facebook at Fjordhammer. There you'll find pictures of my work, and I'll be taking feedback. If you prefer to send me a mail, you can do that at fjordhammerpodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, ha det bra!